Hi guys, how are we doing this evening? This is Michelle with Southern Imagine, and I didn't get to do this on Sunday because I had a special visitor at the house. So family time is always more important than anything. So that's what I was taking care of my granddaughter as she came to visit. So I put this off. We'll do it here today. It's not going to be too terribly of a long live because I just wanted to go over some things when you get a cutting board, and honestly, it doesn't matter the cutting board. You got to do some care to it, and that's one of the things we don't do. I will be one of the first ones to say I don't do this enough to any of my cutting boards like I should. I do not oil them. Oh, hey, we were still here. Sorry about that. I will I will cut this out. So we were talking about cutting board here. I thought I slid it so I would come back. Yeah, had a wonderful neighbor come by. His father comes down and he came to tell us goodbye. So, like I said, I was saying I'd be one of the first ones to say I do not take care of my cutting boards like I should. I don't oil them regularly, and I don't get the life out of them that I need. And it doesn't matter the cutting board that you use, you need to oil them. It doesn't matter if it's just these from just little bamboo boards, the ones that are fairly inexpensive. They need to be oiled as well, because what you're doing is when you don't oil them, you cause them to split. Because most of our cutting boards are not necessarily one solid piece, and if they are, your wood is still going to dry out. And you have to make sure that you're putting that oil back in to keep those boards conditioned, to keep those boards from splitting and warping. And there's other things that we do that we shouldn't do. So some of the things I wanted to go through is when you're doing your cutting boards, you should definitely not use like poultry and fish on a wood cutting board. They don't work well with this because the bacteria gets in, and then we want to bleach them to get this out. And then when you bleach, you're drying your board out, so you're getting into this process. So you should really use a plastic cutting board for any of like your chicken and your fish, those things that are heavy with bacteria. Fruits, vegetables, I would even say, a lot of people will say not even do meat on a wood one. I probably would anyway, just because. But definitely, the chicken and the fish have large amounts of bacteria which will get in here, and you don't want to then bleach your cutting board, because that's what people have a tendency to do. So it'll cause the wood to dry out faster, like I said. Also, if you have one of these great ones that you get that are engraved, like you see here, that they have these engravings on, do not use this side for your board. I would not do that, because then you have more of a chance of any bacteria getting in here. Not to say that you can't use them. You have the backs that you can use. So if you use the backs of them and there's nothing on the back, those would be fine. This is one that I have here that I made, and it needs another really solid oiling. That's why I said I would do this. And then if you have one like this, say it was in the corner, you could use the front of this to cut, because if it's just a small section like in a corner, I wouldn't worry about it, because you just don't want to cut over your design, because again, bacteria has a more tendency to get in here because this has opened up the wood. And even though you're sealing it, and there's some steps that you go through when you seal your board. First thing you need to make sure you do is that you really wash it well. You can use soap on these. It does not matter if you use soap, but it's the act of getting in there and scrubbing the board and then using lots of water on it that's the important part. So when you're doing that, that's what's really cleaning the board. When you then clean your board, after you clean it, you need to towel it dry. Get all the water off, because what's going to happen when you've seen wood that sits out, it gets wet, what does it do? It ends up warping. So that's what's going to end up happening with your board if you're not careful. So after you wash it, stand it up to dry. Wipe it down, really good, and then stand it up to dry and leave it that way until it's nice and dry. You want the air on both sides, because what's going to happen is if the air doesn't get on both sides, that's what's going to cause your board to start to warp. The more your board warps, the more it's going to start to split. And the more you're going to have, you know, that your board's not going to be pretty. You'll start seeing it cup, you'll start seeing it get wavy, and that's what will happen. So definitely dry your board. When you dry it, after you've washed it, stand it up like this until it dries well. And the recommendation is when you get a new board, a brand new board, immediately wash it, clean it, and then saturate it with oil. It's kind of, it's in a way, it's like doing a cast iron skillet for those of you who do cast iron skillets. You really want to get in there and oil that board. Oh, if your board ends up getting smells, instead of using bleach, I forgot about that. If it ends up getting smells or anything like that, you want to get rid of it, use either lemon, wipe it down with lemon, or wipe it down with vinegar. Each of those things will help take away those smells and that. And I've just got my notes to make sure that I'm hitting everything. So when you're oiling it, like I said, this one is still pretty new, so it's soaked everything in. I mean, you just need to saturate it. Try to use just a small corner, because they will soak them. You want to get as much oil as possible. There's no right or wrong way. And I don't know if you can tell, let me fill you in. You can really see how much, I don't know if you can get it, but this board is really absorbing all of this oil that I have just put on. I mean, it's just like soaking it up like a little sponge. Which definitely means I haven't done it enough. Get the edges. And this is what's going to get in there, and it's going to stop that wood from opening. It's going to help close those pores on your wood. It's going to keep that board nice and pretty. It's going to keep it conditioned. And I've read about something else that I want to try that's going to be one extra step, and I was looking for it and I can't find it. Well, I can find it, I just haven't gone to HEB to get it. And we'll talk about that here in a second. So, again, and then the back side. And you're going to say, but I don't want to use all this oil. Well, when you spend $80 to $100 or more on a cutting board, you want to take care of it. I mean, if you can see, there's almost nothing left on this board. Almost nothing left. And all of your boards, when you get them, they are not oiled for you. Now, some of the really high dollar ones, they will oil them for you. I will oil the boards before I send them out. And again, this one, even though it feels like there's a lot of oil on there, there's not. So I'm going to go back through there again. I'm going to make sure I get everything. It's like I said, it's like seasoning a cast iron skillet. It's going to take time. But once you get it done once, it's a once a month process. Once you get it good to where the oil just does not want to stay on here, it doesn't want to soak in, then it's just a once a month process to keep it conditioned. Unless you forget, then you have to kind of start. It's like a cast iron skillet. If you put that bleach on it, if you don't take care of it right, you're going to have to start the whole process over. But yeah, if you're spending money and you've got a really nice cutting board, you definitely do not want to, you don't want it to warp, you don't want it to go away. So you can see how much nicer that looks, and I can still keep going, still keep oiling, Still keep putting the oil on this. The edges are especially important to really get. So that's that one. And I still need to go back through it again. I can still see where the oil, it's just, I'll probably come back in a couple hours and do this again until it doesn't want to soak up, and I'll be doing this over the next couple of days as well as getting in here and re-oiling it. So then we're going to go ahead and I'm going to put this, I'm not going to lay this flat. I'm going to let this sit here and soak. So when I get through with y'all, I'm going to go stand this up. I'm going to let it soak in, see how much soaks in. And honestly, and I'll probably do this again tomorrow to keep doing this. And then when it stops soaking it in, I will, which is probably going to be 2 or 3 more times, then I'll know it's done. And then I'll just wipe the excess off. So even your bamboo cutting boards, like I said, need to be oiled because they are the same thing. Even though they're a fibrous, they're not a wood, they're more of a fiber. You're trying to keep the board conditioned so that it's not going to split apart on you. Plus it just makes your board, especially if you've got one that's for decorative purposes, it makes it look nice. So when you're oiling your board, things that you should not use on this is a vegetable oil or some kind of a cooking oil because they will go rancid. You need to get a mineral oil, okay, that sort of thing. I do like this one. This is one, it's called Howard's. It's just a cutting board oil. But it doesn't have to be a fancy name brand one. It can be just, it can just be a nice mineral oil, something that you know that's not going to go rancid. Because you know, it's basically a food grade mineral oil because you don't want anything that's going to sour or go bad on you or that sort of thing. A beeswax will work as well if you see some of those beeswax oils, because that's the other thing that I wanted to try. If you can find a food grade beeswax after you oil your board, that's the next thing to help seal it. It'll give it an extra set of protection other than just the oil is that beeswax. So that would be the next thing that I would do. I would find a beeswax, some kind of a wood conditioner cream, and put that on there, and it's going to give it that one extra bit of protection to stop the board from warping, to stop the board from splitting. Because I've had some gorgeous cutting boards come through that people have wanted me to engrave on, and it's simply because it's not that they were old and they just needed a little bit of love. And you can repair a cutting board that's split. It's going to take some time. You'll need to take it to somebody who can do that. I haven't gotten into taking care of cutting boards in that way, but that's going to be one of the next things I want to learn. All right, things that you should not do. Okay, you should not put your cutting boards in the dishwasher. It's going to warp your board because the heat is not our friend. That wet heat is not a friend to our cutting boards. We should not do that. Do not ever let them lay flat to dry, especially if they're really, really wet. If they get wet underneath, then dry them off, stand them up, because again, when that moisture sits underneath, that's when they start to warp because that moisture is being sucked into the board, and that's when the board starts to cut. Let's see if there's anything else that I forgot. And I will put this information up, my tips on what you need to do as far as your cutting board. It looks like I've covered everything on there. Yep. And I will put up a short little post about cutting board tips that I have for you. So again, let's go back and let's recap. When you first get your cutting board, they are dry. You have to oil them, and you have to oil them well. And just sitting here, these are being soaked up again. So in the matter of just this little bit of time, you can see, I don't know if you can tell on the board, there's no oil. You saw how much I put on there, but there's very little as far as on here. I have more from my rack. So they're going to be extremely dry. You need to oil them. You need to put that oil in there and do that. Get as much on there as you can. Just sit here for so often. Put it on. Let them go overnight. Okay, if they're dry, do them again. And then keep doing that 2 or 3 more times until your board stops taking the oil. When you do this process, it's going to keep your board healthy. It'll keep your board lasting. Even if it's just a decorative piece, you definitely still want to do all of this, because even just sitting there as a decorative piece, if your board gets dry, it's going to start to split. Think about our wood, especially down here in the Texas heat. What happens when we have dry wood? It starts to split. So this is what we're trying to prevent. We're trying to prevent these spots right here. I don't know if you can see. Let me bring so I can bring you in closer. That's as close as I can get. So anytime you see where the wood changes grain, this is where it's going to be put together. You can see they were glued together there in these spots right in here. I know I can see another change in grain here, and there's another line right here. So anytime you see those lines, that's definitely a spot where the board has been glued together. And then what they do is they cut them out. So you're trying to keep that glue from separating. You're trying to keep that board moist so it stays flexible and it stays pretty. So you will keep doing this, and as soon as no more oil gets into this board, you're going to then, you can stop. You can wipe off the excess. You can wash it if you need to wash off the excess. You can do that, but I promise you, I'll be doing this one several more times. So, and then the next step to help protect is to get a food grade wax, like a beeswax or a paraffin wax, and you can put that on there. I don't have any recommendations for that because I haven't tried one yet. That I couldn't find any at the moment. I need to order some. That'll be the next step, and that's going to help seal and keep the board a little more sanitary. It'll repel the water better when you put that wax on there. That was something new. I hadn't ever heard about doing that. And then other do's, other don'ts. Do not put this in the dishwasher. The hot moist heat will make your board split. It may take 2 or 3 years before it starts to split, but think of the life you could have gotten out of this cutting board if you would have just not put it in. And then after you clean them, wash them, stand them up to dry. It's going to help get air on both sides, because anytime they stay moist on one side, that's when your board starts to warp. Okay? If you need to clean because you've got a smell, then lemon or vinegar. Wipe those on, put those on there until you get your smell out of the way. Do not use bleach. Your bleach is going to dry your board out. And then you're going to have to do this whole process again. It's going to dry it out faster, and you're going to have to re-oil it, because it's just going to suck all of that wonderful oil out of your board. So don't do that. All right, and I think that is it. Oh, again, if you have a cutting board, believe me, most of it, unless you really want it to be decorative, you can, but a lot of us, we actually want you to use your boards. That's why you have a backside. Use the backside. Do not use the engraved side. One, it's just going to mar the prettiness. And then 2, this is again another way just for bacteria to get trapped in, because this is etched into the wood. And then it's not that it's not food safe, it's just that the bacteria and the food particles get in, because it may get missed in the cleaning process. And clean with soap and water, scrub. You don't have to use a brush, but just a nice vigorous scrubbing with your towel, and then make sure you stand them up when you dry. And I'm keep watching how this oil just gets sucked in. I got a dry spot right here, got another dry spot right here. So, and also, again, boards usually will not come oiled when you purchase them, so that should be one of the first things that you do. It does not matter if it's an acacia board, if it is a board, I honestly do not know what this one is, but it's a hardwood. You know, guys, if somebody gives you a pine cutting board, do not do that. That's too soft a wood. You need a hardwood. And even if it's a bamboo cutting board, And there's some very nice bamboo cutting boards out there. Those need to be oiled as well. I got a eucalyptus one that I'm going to try and see how that engraves. I think that's going to be gorgeous. So when you, even these bamboo cutting boards, they definitely all need to be oiled. Okay. So if you have any questions, anything about taking care of your cutting board that you need to know, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to talk to you about any issues that you might be having. If your boards split, if they start to split, like I said, they can be repaired. I have not, we can find somebody to help repair your board, especially if it's got sentimental values, because I know there are some people who've had cutting boards in their family for years, and you want to keep those. So if they're in your family for years and they haven't been oiled and you don't have it yet, but you're going to get it, make sure that, you know, you give somebody some tips on how to take care of your cutting boards. So cutting board care is what we wanted to talk about. And I will put up a link to a blog post that I'm going to put up about this, and I'll give a short little, I have a short little graphic that I'll put up for you with some real quick tips on do's and don'ts when you do your cutting boards. All right, guys, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I hope this helps. I'm going to come up with some other things that we'll talk about, not necessarily some home decor things. I've got one that I want to put up on how I redid the sides of around my fireplace, my shelving that's inset, the built-ins. That was the word I was looking for, the built-ins. So I will put that one up when I get it finally finished. I did that a couple of months ago, and I just haven't had a chance to put that one up. And then we're going to talk about just some different ways to decorate. Because if you notice, and you've seen some of my other videos, I have an older home. So how do you decorate, especially when you have wood paneling that's not necessarily conducive to painting? Okay, because I have some people say paint the paneling, and you can. It's just some prep work you have to do with it. All right, guys. Talk to y'all later.